Salve, o illustrissime. Credo ego vos mirari, quid sit, quod cum tot summi oratores hominisque nobilissimi sedeant, ego potissimo surexerim. Oh, sorry, I seem to be speaking in Latin. It must be these medieval robes we're wearing that confused me. And why are we surrounded by these Gothic buildings with their buttresses and crenellations organized around courtyards and cloisters, entered through pointed arches, if this isn't the Middle Ages or Hogwarts? I mean this as a serious question. And since I'm a medieval historian, you might expect me to hold forth for the next 12 minutes, yes, 12 minutes, about the medieval roots of the modern university. It is certainly true that universities have a medieval past all the way down to their basic organizational structures. For example, the college and house systems, common in many universities, were originally formed by students who banded together in the Middle Ages to defend themselves against professors, to arrange lodging, facilitate studying, organize a kitchen, and establish a joint wine cellar. Alas, that last tradition only survives in Oxford and Cambridge. The great rituals of university life are also medieval. When the undergraduates among you gathered in Rockefeller Chapel for the annual Aims of Education lecture that welcomed you into the university, you were participating in a medieval tradition, one praised in 1699 by the philosopher Giambattista Vico, who gave his university's oration that year as among the most illustrious traditions of university life. The rituals of graduation in which we are presently engaged are similarly full of medieval echoes. The titles you're about to receive, bachelor, master, doctor, are all medieval, as are the honors, cum laude, etc., conferred with them, and the traditional parchment diploma for inscribing them. Even the robes we're all wearing derived from the dress of medieval students, and nearly every aspect of their design is meant to evoke some ancient symbolism. But none of this tells us much about why the University of Chicago, like many great North American universities, looks so medieval. Our founders were perfectly aware that they were establishing a modern institution despite their unique system of numbering convocations. Yours is the 527th, which might imply to the uninitiated that we were founded in 1489. The University of Chicago was built in and for the modern age and demanded of its students and faculties that they discover the future, crescat scientia, which they have done. Hence, many of you are graduating in disciplines unimaginable 125 years ago. Indeed, universities in general may well be the most future-oriented institutions of the modern world, in the double sense that they're devoted to looking beyond the horizons of the known and to preparing their students for lifetimes to come. So the question remains, why does an institution so dedicated to the future construct its space and its rituals in ways so consciously evocative of the distant past? I believe that the deliberate architectural and ritual anachronicity of our university is not merely the product of history. It's also an instantiation of one of the most vital tasks of a great modern university, to cultivate in its students and its faculties a particular type of sensibility to time, which I will call a time of mind. Since it may not be clear what I mean by this, and since this cultivation is one of the university's most precious gifts to each of you and to society in general, I'd like to spend a few of our last moments together meditating upon it. So there are some obvious ways in which the time of a great university is different from other types of time in the world. First and foremost, in the extraordinary freedom it gives its inhabitants to shape it as they will. When to sleep, when to study, to love or play, what problems to work on, and with what degree of attention. During our years in universities, we have a freedom of choice in these matters that we probably did not have before and will not have again. Student poetry from the Middle Ages makes it clear that this was also true then. Quote, "Go study," urges reason, "I would obey indeed, but when love whispers treason, whose bidding should I heed?" That poetry, called Goliardic verse, also makes clear that the freedoms of university time can be abused. To die inside a drinking shop, that is my true vocation, to pass away in holy bliss through high intoxication, and all the angels watching me would shout to God in heaven, Lord have mercy on his soul, he's drunk before 11. 12th century. But whatever its potential for abuse, societies, medieval and modern, have done everything in their power to defend the freedoms of university time. That defense has always been dear, which means, among other things, expensive. One medieval father put it, quote, a student's first song is always for money, and there's no letter that doesn't end with a request for cash. Whether you're an undergraduate or a graduate student, your presence here and your exemption from the demands of everyday time in the ordinary world was made possible by enormous generosity. Generosity on the parts of parents, of university trustees and other philanthropists, and of a nation whose taxes make possible Pell Grants, the National Science Foundation, and many other things. It's this economy of generosity that has put time for contemplation, a type of time that the ancient Romans called otium, and associated exclusively with senators and other aristocrats, within the reach of so many of us today, if only for the years we're privileged to spend at a great university. Why is this gift of otium, of university time, so valuable that Western societies have chosen to dedicate so many resources to making it available to you? My colleagues in economics might argue that your years at university can best be understood as an excellent investment in the development of human capital, and they are certainly that. But I want to suggest that the future time value of your labor is not what is especially human about what you have acquired during your years at the University of Chicago. That lies rather in an attitude, an awareness, a time of mind hinted at already by our architectural setting, namely the knowledge that although for us finite creatures the passage of time seems to be the most familiar and implacable given of our being, we can choose to make it unfamiliar, to bend it like a great pianist bends the tempo of a Bach sarabande in ways that create startling new insights. Creating this time of mind is one of the responsibilities of every great university, and in it lie the possibilities of discovery. I mean this in an obvious and a less obvious way. The obvious, dedicating years to reach insights about Hammurabi or Hamlet, to find a new algebraic invariant with which to classify a topological space, or to discover a new technique for gene editing, has required a certain degree of exemption from the short-term time horizons of the everyday world. It requires a different kind of attention as well, one capable of screening out much of the constant clamor of the cosmos, of stilling the roiling and rumbling of being long enough to attend to a question that leads beyond the immediate horizon of the present. It required you to learn to play chess in a world of Tetris. I guess that dates me. You may be leaving this unique zone of exemption from some of the demands of time, but you take the ability to choose your time of mind with you into the world. And now the less obvious, the ability we cultivate here to choose the temporality of our attention and the direction of our thought, the ability to step into a time of mind. This ability is the prerequisite for all great discovery, if by discovery we mean rendering the familiar strange. Nietzsche once complained that what most of the world wants when it asks for knowledge is, quote, that something strange should be reduced to something familiar. He called this the error of errors, and I agree. What is familiar is what we are used to, and what we are used to is what is most difficult to know. The greater discovery lies in becoming aware of our most basic assumptions so that we can question them and make them strange. That was the point of a joke, not very funny, told by the novelist David Foster Wallace about two young fish who are swimming along. They meet an older fish who greets them with, "Morning, how's the water?" The two young fish swim on for a bit, and then one of them looks at the other and says, "What the hell is water?" Half a century before, the poet W.H. Auden made a similar point in an equally aqueous but much grimmer way. Quote, "A person struggling to save himself from drowning becomes an intellectual insofar as he is thinking about the conditions of his existence." So here's the good news. You don't have to encounter a wise fish or risk a watery death in order to become an intellectual, if by this we mean learning to exercise your human choice about what to think about and our ability to step out of the everyday familiar into a time of mind and discovery. You can simply choose, as each of you have done, to spend time at the University of Chicago with its marvelously anachronic mixture of architectural and intellectual temporalities. In a few minutes, President Zimmer will ask each of you to stand, will formally confer upon you your degree with another allusion to the distant past. I welcome you into this ancient and venerable company of scholars. And the University of Chicago will become your common alma mater, your nourishing mother. All of us who remain behind hope that you will return to this mother early and often. But we hope even more that wherever you find yourselves in the years to come, you will also find this mother and her peculiar time of mind within you, always there for you to step into, always ready to render the familiar strange and provoke you to wonder. Ave atque vale, I salute you and farewell.